instead of just pushing through it, which I normally would do as a normal athlete, I was just like, I don't really need to be putting my body under this stress. And those moments I'm like, I just can think of what Dennis would say, and I know he would support that decision, but it's a different mindset shift for me for sure, because it's like, God, my normal athlete self would then be racked with guilt of like, oh, I didn't achieve this thing, like training ride that I was supposed to do. And so yeah, it's just been a huge shift.
For me, it's always health first, and then fun second, performance comes third. Because otherwise the consistency, sustainability is all off, and there is also a long life after cycling. And I used to be a cyclist professionally, and I would have done anything to win a bike race, even if that would shave 3 years of my life. Right now, I think that was idiotic for me to think. But that said, is like, pregnancy is for everybody super individual. So that really means you have to do it day by day.
You're listening to Endurance Unlimited, a TrainingPeaks podcast for athletes and coaches, no matter what you're training for. Dial in those workouts with deep insights and cutting-edge science from the most prominent voices in the endurance and hybrid sports world. Today's episode is a topic that we've never covered before, which, to be honest, makes me feel a little embarrassed. But it is probably the most important topic of all, and that is how to navigate pregnancy as a female athlete. And beyond that, how can a coach be of benefit and help within that most cherished of times? I'm honored that pro gravel racer Sarah Sturm and her coach Dennis van Winden joined me to discuss their very personal experience as they navigate Sarah's pregnancy. At the time of recording, Sarah was 5 months pregnant and has a due date of late July. She has been very public with her pregnancy and how she has navigated daily training, managing sponsorships, and race invitations. If you don't know Sarah, she has been a very successful pro gravel racer, having won races such as the Belgian Waffle Ride, placing top 3 several times in races such as the Traca, and she has also placed top 5 in the Lifetime Grand Prix. Dennis van Winden is her coach and is based in Girona, Spain. He is the head of performance for Orange Seal Academy. He is a former professional cyclist, having raced for 13 years, racing for teams such as Rabobank, Lotto Jumbo, and he competed in the biggest of races such as Paris-Roubaix, Tour of Flanders, the Giro, and the Vuelta. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'm grateful that Sarah and Dennis were so open with sharing their experience as Sarah navigates pregnancy as an elite athlete. Hey, Sarah, Dennis, I'm really, really, really excited about this conversation. So much to talk about. And this is like out of my norm. This is not something we really actually dug into. I know. And we'll find out, Dennis, how much it might be in your wheelhouse or not. But we're here. All thanks Sarah and her upcoming pregnancy.
Current
this
pregnancy.
has got to be, all lights are on you. It's got to feel good. And I just want to say thank you so much first for being so public and open. This is certainly not the first podcast you've been on. You announced it on a podcast and, and all that. So first of all, I really appreciate you doing this and helping educate folks along the way.
Yeah, no, it's been wild. Honestly, Dennis has been along for the ride. We told Dennis before we even told our family, which is so funny. But, and it makes sense. He and I work really closely as, an athlete and coach usually do. And yeah, it's been crazy. Like just the whole experience, like it was both surprising to us, getting pregnant, and also like it was something that obviously we wanted to have happen, but it's not like you really get a say in the timing of that kind of thing. As I've learned, in my head, I was like, great, I'm going to race the Grand Prix. I'm going to have this whole season. And then exactly at this date, we'll get pregnant and it'll be good. And it was totally not that way at all. So
it is unscripted and there's no normal way to go about it. Everyone's unique. And so that's another really cool part of the conversation is how is it unique for you and how have you navigated this unknown time? Obviously I've listened to podcasts with you learning about how things have been going for you, in preparation for this talk. But the one thing I haven't really heard of is that coach athlete relationship. And,
Yeah.
Training Peaks certainly is centered around the coach, deliberate practice. It's not always about the numbers. It's about how you feel and motivation, mood, sleep quality, all of that. So it's really cool to have you on with your coach, Dennis, and kind of dig into some of those conversations you guys have had as much
Yeah.
as you want to talk about them. So Dennis, yeah, welcome. Where are you dialing in from?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, like, thank you for having us on this podcast. It's
Hmm.
it's amazing that Sarah gets pregnant. It was like what she already mentioned was a big wish. So it's also something what on the front end we have spoken about. Like you need to be healthy and happy first of
Mm.
all to become pregnant. I think a lot of people know that it's also not that easy for everybody
Yeah.
to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually,
and like,
Dennis, that's
Yeah.
such a good point.
Yeah.
I like when we first started working together, I was like confidentially between the two of us, I was like, "Hey, I want you to know like this is something that Dylan and I want, and I don't want to give up my career as an athlete, but we want to start a family." And Dennis, without like any falter, was like, "Great, let's do it. You'll be stronger."
Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought of that. I forgot, Dennis. That was years ago that I told you, I was like, hey, we might want to do this one day. And that's been really helpful because I don't think every coach would necessarily have that perspective or confidence to be like, yeah, awesome.
I mean, it's great. We always try to work with the Orange Seal Academy to really have like a real deep connection with the athletes. And for me, it's now I maybe go a little bit a step ahead, but for me, it's always health first, and then fun second, performance comes third. Because otherwise the consistency, sustainability is all off, and that is what any coach knows. It's like it's all about the consistency and sustainability. And then, I mean, I'm a father. I have an amazing active son, and I mean, I think that is real life. Uh, Performing on the bike, it's awesome, but there is also a long life after cycling. And I used to be a cyclist professionally, um, and that was in that moment was the most important thing for me.
Yeah.
And I would have done anything to win a bike race, even if that would shave 3 years of my life. Right now, I think that was idiotic for me to think. Um, but that said, is like pregnancy is for everybody super individual. Um, and some people they feel, especially in the second trimester, they feel great, and some people feel great in the first trimester as well. Um, so that really means you have to do it day by day, and we will talk probably in a little bit like how we figure this out. But communication is the key. Um, but I think it's great that we can talk about this, because also what we found with Sarah, she goes to the doctor, she asks questions. I'm a professional athlete. What can I do right now? And they basically you leave the hospital, you leave the doctor's office, and you still have a lot of questions. Yeah, can I train? Yeah, like uh, what the mother of my son used to say, um, a baby is not like an Amazon package. It's not like, this is not what I ordered and I ship it back. It's not like this. No, this is the main priority. And especially for a cyclist like Sarah, um, you know, cycling is a very important part of the daily life. It's not like, whoa, now we're pregnant, we cannot train, we cannot ride anymore. No, the opposite. You actually would need it. But everything is changing. The metrics are changing, and there's also something with Sarah. Like she was like, well, my heart rate, like it's completely changed. Yeah, it's
Different
not only
person.
the. Yeah, no, it
It is
actually is.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So we yeah.
you mentioned staying healthy first. That's kind of like an underlying principle, if you will. Eh, Sorry, you had the season wrapped up, then you get pregnant. That you've talked about how you think that's because of the stress, the travel, and like your body's like ready, if you will, like
Yeah.
after the season.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Dennis and I have chatted about this too. Like, even though I guess more than anything, it made me realize like how much stress athletes are under. Just even if you're doing everything right and have like a low stress existence. Like, for me, it was an interesting personal experiment in cortisol and just like what racing, because like I mean, step one is like for women, and I know there's been a lot of conversation about like women's health and like getting your period back and making sure that you're not too underfueled or overtrained or both, which is, red S. And there's been a lot more conversation around that. And I have to thank all the other women that came before me for bringing that to light. And also with Training Peaks, like you can have all that information in Training Peaks, which is awesome. So you're not having to like remember to put everything in on your own. Like it syncs with my Garmin and I can, add whatever information. And when I was using natural cycles, like it synced with that. So like it's really a great platform for like making sure the coach actually does have all of this information and the athlete too. Like I'm not a big data and numbers person, which is why I love working with someone like Dennis, because I'm like, I want you to pay attention. I will upload as much information as possible. But what I learned was like, I was traveling and racing a ton and training. And even though, I was doing that correctly, if you will, as a professional athlete tries to do, it still is like so much energy that your body puts into this and your body reads it as stress. And I didn't even feel stressed, it was like daily life. It was like, okay, last race of the season or like traveling home from Europe, like it wasn't even, bad. And it's just too much. And then the second that, we were on off season, it took half a week for for me to like recover from that, which is crazy. And my body's like, hey, cool, ready to go. Here you go. Here's a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. You got it.
Ready
Wow.
or not.
A lot of people may be asking, we need to level set here. How far along are you?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me pull up my Training Peaks. I think I'm about to be 25 weeks.
All right.
Yeah, so more than halfway. For normal people who count things in months, I'm a little over 5 months.
Yeah.
I was also a normal person that I was like, why does everyone do this in weeks? It's so confusing. But it's just because like so much happens from literally week to day. I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Other than my wife giving birth, I feel like I know about your pregnancy more than any other woman I've known.
Oh, good. Great. So, my husband will really appreciate that.
Yeah. Educational for me, for sure.
I mean, me too. I don't know very much about pregnancy. Honestly, Dennis knew more than I did.
No, yeah. So how did you break the news to Dennis? Was he your third call, your second call? Like, how did this play out in terms of like other than family?
Yeah.
By the way, I rode with your dad in Moab in like November, and you were like pregnant then.
Did he know? He must have known.
I have no idea. He's not going to tell me if he did, but I rode with,
he would, though.
I did many hours on the road bike with him.
Yeah, he wouldn't have said anything because we were really careful in the first trimester. It was basically like me, Dylan, and Dennis who knew for a while. Just because like, I had so many friends go through miscarriages and, I didn't want people, mainly like, not that they would have done anything, but I think any woman, athlete or not athlete, can understand this. You don't necessarily want people knowing that you're like trying because it affects people. If you're up for a promotion, if, you're getting selected for the Grand Prix, like, I mean, I had already been selected at that point, but like there's a lot of stuff in your career that like is, dictated by you being pregnant or not, or trying or not. So for the first 3 months, we didn't tell anyone. And then we told family after we told Dennis. But yeah, I mean, he like
coach first.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, we were like, hey, this crazy. I mean, I was still in shock, honestly. Like, I think it was a couple days after we found out, right? Like I feel like we had just found out but I mean, I talked to Dennis more than I talked to my
Yeah.
parents, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we told
Yeah.
my sister, but
Yeah.
yeah, and then like all of us had to keep it on the DL for a very long time because I just wanted to get past like the ultrasound, hearing the heartbeat, getting the genetic testing back. And then, I was like, okay, well, at this point, like, let's wait to Mid-South because then it'll be in person and I can
Yeah.
tell people then. But yeah,
So
so
Dennis, what were the first thoughts for you? How did you start to take this on with the coach mentality?
I mean, I knew that it was a big wish for Sarah and Dylan to become parents. And that is also like, Sarah, you can correct me if you think different, but like we have spoken, okay, if this is a desire, what I 100% support, it also really means that we need to be absolutely on top of that general health aspect.
yep, yep,
And if we master that, you increase your opportunity. I personally also believe, a healthy body will also have way more function out of the, how we call it, key workouts. That is the harder sessions, what
Mhm.
we really focus on and we want to be fresh for. So with that, I think, yeah, in that moment when she told me, I was directly super stoked. I mean, I could see or I could hear on Sarah that she was not super comfortable telling me yet because it was so early. But she would also probably think, oh, he's gonna tell me to do some key workouts, and like I'm not sure if that is the right thing to do. It was like I knew way before he went for the first time to the gynecologist.
yeah,
So like so we directly said, okay, let's pray that everything goes as you want it to go when you're pregnant. But that is what we need to focus on right now. So then it means like, okay, we are riding, but also metrics are changing. And the goal of training right now is not training for the lifetime Grand Prix. It completely changes to like you're training right now for two. And then
Yeah.
I think, pregnancy is not a limitation. It's just a physiological transition
mm,
what requires an adaptation in a training plan. And that means that we basically, sorry for training peaks, but we erase the metrics out of the plan. So
Yeah.
FTP is no longer a thing. Heart rate zones, and that is also, maybe Sarah, you want to
Yeah.
explain this, but like it's not relevant in this moment anymore.
yeah. I've had a
But
really
yeah,
hard
we
time with that for some reason.
With the heart
Den-
rate, the metrics, the what
just
part?
like I feel like poor Dennis is like a broken record at this point. It's like especially in the first trimester. I mean, it was a
Mm.
big, Dennis is already a parent, like he's been through this and I've spent my whole life as an athlete, I just think about myself. Truly,
Yeah.
and it was this instantaneous change that I mean, my body's changing, of course, but, like and my metrics are changing, and I don't have control over that, but I had to, like, really work on changing my mindset to, like, really this isn't just about me anymore, like, really and especially in the first trimester, it's a scary time, like, there's anyone who's, gone through a first trimester, it's really hard. There's a lot of unknowns. You call your doctor and they're like, great, we'll see you in 12 weeks. You're like, I'm pregnant. Like, you think you just get in for an ultrasound and you get all the, I mean, maybe it's different in other countries, but at least in the good old America, you call and they're like, great, we'll see you in 12 weeks. And then we'll, tell you if this thing has a heartbeat and anything. And so you're just like, okay, Dennis was really smart and we played it really safe. And I hadn't started feeling crappy yet. And I was like, but I can do all these things. And, I was like, it just took me, I felt like it took me a little bit of time and still currently to actually like have that mind shift. And yeah, I was like really hung up on my heart rate. Like yeah, or 2 days ago was the first time I've seen it go over 163 beats per minute. since I got pregnant, which is not my max heart rate.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did the workouts consist of? Was it for mental health? Like, if you feel good, do this. If you don't feel good, are there options? Like, how are you actually going through that first
Yeah,
trimester?
those are good questions. I think that was like one of the first things that Dennis and I had to kind of figure out, and it's been ever evolving since, because like I said, every week and certainly every trimester is really different. And I mean, we could scroll back. I'm like trying to remember what we did, but at first it was just like, yeah, stay active, and like I I wanted some workouts, and I wanted to, keep as much as my normal life,
Mm,
happening as possible. And so I feel like he sort of obliged and gave me workouts, and I just like could, as the trimester progressed, I just started feeling worse and worse. And I was like running to the gym, and just slowly things just like naturally tapered off, because I mean, there
yeah.
wasn't even a choice for me.
And what about fueling? I mean, did fueling change
Yeah.
hydration?
Yeah, all of it. I mean, I work with a nutritionist as well. And actually Training Peaks is sort of like where we all come together, and, she sees what Dennis programs in. And for a while she was like, okay, we're doing like 10 to 15 hours a week. And so she's adjusting my macros, accordingly. And, based on the training. But it's hard because, Dennis would program something and I'm like, oh my God, I could barely get out of bed today. But then the
Yeah.
next day I'm like, feel great. And so, you know, Dennis has hacked the athlete mindset because, he was a pro athlete once, and he's like, I'm not going to give you, training for the entire week, knowing that like you might be totally fried on like a Wednesday, and then you're going to see that you have training on Sunday. And then if I
Yeah.
take that away, you're going to know and feel like you didn't achieve that. So it's been that way of training, and the way that Dennis does programming is really helpful, especially through pregnancy, because there's a lot of disappointment as an
Yeah.
athlete. Like, you're grasping at this life that you once had and excited for the new life, but then you're also just like not feeling great too. But yeah, as far as fueling goes, like, I was like, whoa, I bonk so much quicker, so much
Mm.
easier. And, even like an hour spin, I'm bringing like 3 or 4 gels with me just in case.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot since, I mean, that was back in November and December. And so, I mean, that feels like, years ago at this point.
And Dennis, are you giving her options at the beginning of the week or every day, or how, like, practically, how are you navigating that?
We try to check in. Right now, we try to check in like every at least once a week. Like with Sarah is like she says, but I'm pregnant. You don't have to worry about me so much. Focus on the guys. We need to perform. But like what we try to do is like we give options for when you feel good, and they're based off RPE right now. So like
Mm,
that is the main goal. Is like everything is changed. We have a couple red lights in there. We do not want to get dehydrated. We don't want to increase core temperature too much. We want to
Yeah.
do everything as safe as possible. Right now, the performance goal is let the let the baby grow quiet and calm, as strong as possible.
Yeah.
That is our main objective. And then we give, we basically just talk about maximas, like what we can do maximum.
mm.
We do not talk like, when is the last time that we talk about the power number? Up
I
to
mean, I
this
brought
week,
it up.
because you got,
Yeah.
yeah, you got the
I
season
was like, I got
PB
a power record.
2026.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice personal
Not all
best.
time, just for
Yeah. Yeah.
26.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But I am
Eh,
excited to go look and compare it to last year, just so I can see the difference. Like it is like RPE is really helpful.
mm,
Rate of perceived exertion when you're pregnant, just because like, your numbers are totally wackadoodle. There's not they're not the same
yeah.
as they once were. Like, I have fixated on my heart rate. I just find it really fascinating that like my heart rate is so much, like my max heart rate now in pregnancy is way lower. I mean, it's like
Mm,
it's like 25 beats per minute lower than
Yeah.
my normal max. I mean, I'm sure my max is the
Yeah.
same. I just can't achieve that. I've done VO2 efforts, and the highest heart rate I've seen is 25 beats under my normal max. But anyway, it's just like there's no way you can like fixate on numbers. And so, Dennis will talk, and then he'll give me if I'm like, hey, I'm feeling really good and the weather's looking nice, he'll plug in like 2 different workouts, and he's like, just move it around. And I have moved a lot of, I usually never shift workouts ever. And
Yeah,
I have
before.
moved those things all around my
Yeah.
calendar.
Every day is different.
Yeah, truly. Yeah. I'm lucky that I feel really, now that I've recovered from the flu, which I don't recommend, um, uh, I feel that like boost in energy in the second trimester. You're not like so big that, you are really uncomfortable riding. I think the worst thing is that I just have to pee like 1,000 times on a bike ride now. So, but it's nice. Like for me, like, is the training doing anything like for, the longevity of my career? Like, no, like it doesn't, it's not going to affect my, 2027 calendar training at all, but it's really like mental health for sure. For me, like, I felt way better if I could get out and do some workout and just like mentally, I mean, your athlete mindset, it's hard to reprogram that overnight. And
Yeah.
so it's just nice to like wake up and look at TrainingPeaks and like, you really can't look at, the 3 numbers that every athlete looks at on TrainingPeaks. Those, I just like shift my calendar in my, on my computer over so I can't even see them because,
Yeah.
you could actually, that would be a really fun little thing that you could toggle on and off as an athlete. Like,
Yeah.
if you could have like pregnancy settings so you just like don't see like, your fitness fatigue and form
A
on there. Cause
perspective.
yeah, I just
Pregnancy
don't
perspective.
yeah, totally.
Good feedback. I love it.
Yeah.
And what about strength training?
Yeah, I've been doing that's actually the one thing I've like been able to keep consistently from, November until now. Yeah, I'm lucky. I get to go to like a group class here, which is a little more motivating sometimes than just going on your own. But yeah, I always forget to include that in, how much strain I've, taken on. But yeah, I've been able to do these strength training classes 3 times a week. Actually, Payson almost blew my cover when I went on his podcast because he, I knew I was pregnant at that point, but I hadn't told anyone. And
Okay.
he had me on and he was like, 3 times a week, like that's a lot. Like, how are you balancing that with like your preseason training? And I was just like, bro, back off. Like, that's all I got.
You mentioned that some of your friends discovered and they kind of figured it out through your Strava feeds.
Yeah. Yeah. I forgot about Strava. Actually, Dennis was the one who told me early on. He was like, you might want to hide your Strava. And I just, simply forgot to do that. But yeah, there was quite a few people, especially after I announced and told them, they were like, we knew it. Like you were doing like 10-hour weeks. And like actually Stetna figured it out when I was in
Oh, wow.
Hawaii. Yeah,
Wow.
he was like, I figured you were pregnant when you went to Hawaii and I saw what your training was
That's crazy.
there. Yeah.
So I'd like to go back a tad bit and kind of go revisit how you went about notifying folks. And one big organization that you notified early on was Lifetime Grand Prix, because you were accepted into the 26 Grand Prix. That's a big deal. What, 30 women are invited to that? Really big deal. How did you go about, and when did you notify them? How'd that go?
So I told them pretty early because it's the one sticky point in like the whole
Yeah.
process because the Grand Prix is so competitive to get into now, and especially this year it was, I would say, probably the most competitive year, and so I was just like, I didn't know when I accepted that I was pregnant. We had no idea. So when I found out, obviously I wanted to wait because like I didn't want to tell them too early and whatever. So, but they were they were the first like kind of more important, like, work side of things, that I notified them, and I requested that they keep it truly like between the people I told, because I hadn't told my sponsors yet, but I wanted to give them a heads up because it affected other athletes.
Mhm.
And especially on such a competitive year. Yeah, it's a coveted spot. And I know they have the wild card, the draw that, you have to race the first two races and then they pick wild card slots. But I was like, if I could tell them early enough, maybe they can just slot in the person that was on the bubble, which is actually what I had wanted. I knew that there were a couple women that it came down to on that line, and I was
Mhm.
like, this is a great
That's cool.
opportunity. But
Yeah.
and to their credit, they kept everything as fair as possible, just because they have to think about the general population too, not just this one specific instance. And then when I told them, I also was, I had been talking to a couple friends, and I was like, and Dennis as well. And I was like, man, this is probably not the last time that this is going to happen on the
Yeah.
women's side of the Grand Prix, and it is stressful. Um, but it's not like I want to be done with my career either. And I was like, gosh, it would like, there's no guarantees of anything, as a pro athlete. Like, it's a really volatile job. And especially as someone who's pregnant and, going to be experiencing parenthood soon. It just, I was like, I'm just going to ask them and see what they think about deferring my entry to 2027. And then that sort of became a conversation of like, can this be a policy with everybody? Because I don't think I'm going to be the last one. And I think
Right.
it just would feel like a huge step forward, in the sport of cycling. Like, other groups, like professional trail runners who I chatted with, like their series is very different than the Grand Prix, but there's some like maternity programs built into
Oh.
those series where you can defer
Huh.
entries. And so I, have to tip my hat to them. They figured out how to do it. I mean, there's going to be there's going to be improvements on the policy, I'm sure, moving forward, but it's a big first step for sure. And I'm really stoked to be a part of that.
Yeah, it was like a month after you announced or so that they came out
Yeah,
with that.
we worked on it for quite a while. Like, Michelle and I had quite a few meetings, and Chemo was part of that. And, I'm sure their whole team, at the Grand Prix. And they really, like, I basically proposed the idea to them.
Yeah.
And then they figured out how to make it happen and make it like a legitimate policy, which is cool.
Awesome. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's gonna affect many more, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious. Like, we actually were going through the roster, and I know most of the women, and I'm like, yes, no, like, no, probably not. Nope, nope, no.
Yeah, but what
Like,
about, 5 years from now?
yeah,
It's
but
gonna
in
be
fact, yeah,
turnover, right?
totally.
It's great they were so open, and leaned into it. That's great.
Yeah.
And you sounds like all your sponsors too, as well. It was
Yeah.
really came across well.
Yeah. I mean, I would have been really surprised if anyone was like, ooh, no thanks. Actually, TrainingPeaks was the one that I was like in conversations with, before I got pregnant. And I was like, yeah, Grand Prix, world champs, gravel earth, like planning on
They're
all
like,
these great
"Yeah."
things. Yeah. Like, yeah, sign me. And they're like, yeah. And then in the middle, my agent, we were going back and forth because she was getting a pregnancy policy put into all my contracts, or a pregnancy clause.
Mhm.
And on that email, I was like, I had to tell my agent, and I was like, hey, I'm actually pregnant. And then I told Training Peaks, and I was like, I would not have thought differently if they were like, oh, thank you so much. We are going to actually look for a different athlete, because, it was totally different than what we had, the terms that we had agreed upon. And Training Peaks was the first and I think only new sponsor that was like, great, love it, awesome, welcome to the team. Like, we'll see you in 26 and 27.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's such an awesome story, and it's just not been told enough, and I
totally.
think
Well,
that's
especially in
really
light of
yeah,
other women getting dropped by sponsors.
yeah,
Like, my news came out almost at the exact same time as a professional marathon runner getting dropped by one of her nutrition sponsors because she was
yeah.
pregnant. And
No,
I mean,
but it's
she's a big athlete.
yeah, yeah. And Dennis, have you worked with other pregnant
No,
cyclists,
but I think
other
it is it's a great experience. But like I just wanted to follow up on what you guys were talking about earlier with the sponsors and the Grand Prix putting this in. I think it's a great help as well. But there's also a possibility for a, a loss of identity, right? The body is changing, fear of losing performance. Right now, you have the backup, like you have a backup from race organizers and your sponsors. It keeps you happy. Like in the
Yeah.
end, that will help you as well on the bike. It keeps you happy throughout the day because if you feel backed up, you feel
Yeah.
people having your back. I think that is, you know, it's really important. So chapeau.
That's such a good point. I think people really, especially when looking at athletics, because there's so much data out there and technology, like it gets lost along the way. But I think truly the biggest part is the mental health. I mean, I think anyone who's raced or has worked with athletes knows that like you can do all these other pieces right, but if your head's not in the right space, like it doesn't matter. And I think the like identity component is massive, and there is this huge shift in parenthood. And I've heard from other female athletes that have become pregnant and had kids, and male and female, and it's totally different on the flip side. And and you are simultaneously like you're trying to get not back to what you once were, because like you're never going to be that person. It's different than like recovering from an injury, because just your entire life is different. It's not like you
Yeah.
just go back to like, okay, I'm going to go out for my 6-hour training right now. There's a lot of, I mean, I don't know this yet firsthand, but I have plenty of friends, and you guys are both parents, so you can attest to this, but there's a lot more coordinating, and it's not just thinking about yourself. And that's a huge, I mean, I'm anticipating all of these things right now. I'm pregnant, and like, it's funny, like pregnant women are really celebrated, which is awesome. And I really appreciate that. But I'm like, my life is, I mean, other than getting a lot rounder and a little heavier and slightly more hormonal, like I still have autonomy. Like I can leave my house whenever I want. I can go do a training ride at the time that I want to do a training
Yeah.
ride. But at the end of July, that's going to be very different. And I feel like parenthood seems a lot harder than pregnancy does.
Yeah. There's a whole unknown, obviously yet to come postpartum,
Yeah.
and that's a whole nother story,
Mhm.
and I'm sure it's got to be, it's unsettling, you don't know,
Totally.
and so how do you go about, gosh, I mean, you're not sitting there setting goals per se, for 2027 yet, you have these hopes of like doing the races, but how are you guys navigating that? Or is it just like way too early to even be thinking about it?
I mean, I told Dennis, before, obviously before it was public, that I got a deferral for 2027 for the Grand Prix. And honestly, I feel like he and I both celebrated like that. That in and of itself is just that's a huge goal, like
Yeah.
that. First step is getting through the birth and the pregnancy and the birth in a healthy way, for the baby and me. And then, after that, it's like figuring out this big puzzle of like how to be a new athlete. And, getting into the Grand Prix, which obviously, like, we know the standard of that is the highest it's ever been. And it's, for me, it's really exciting. And I was also sort of fueled by how excited Dennis was when I told him that, because I think, we both have that same mindset of like, okay, this is a huge unknown, like totally unknown for both
Yeah.
myself, well, all of us, Dylan, myself, and Dennis. And yeah, I am, I'm kind of fueled by that unknown. And I think that that's why Dennis and I work really well together, because we're just like, you figure it out. Maybe he feels differently.
No, no, no. I feel it exactly this way. Only thing is, I see it only as opportunities. We have opportunities right now. We have the
Mhm.
opportunity, to reinvent Sarah Sturm in 2027,
Yeah.
and we do not know how it is. I mean, you asked me earlier about other athletes. I mean, um, I met Erin Haag in Nova
Hmm.
Mesto for, I think that was the first time when I met her. It was the Olympic year, and she went to the Olympics that year actually pregnant. I think Sarah,
I
not
figured it
right
out.
now. It sounds like right now it sounds like she felt great for through the first and up to right now. She felt great, but it has not been all the
Hmm.
time great,
Yeah,
right? And I think
correct.
that is the thing. Is like we, what we try to master on daily basis is like, okay, what can we do? And if we think right now we can do that later this week, we still might pivot because it's better for the day. And
Hmm.
that is
Yeah.
just something with guidance as a coach, you just need to be flexible. I mean, Sarah knows, okay, here it's already night. You guys are, you still have daylight. Um, we are in different time zone, but I'm always available.
It's
You just
crazy.
call me whenever you want,
Yeah.
because it's important. And like what I always say to my riders, it's like I'm not always available because I've nothing better to do. I am always available because I know how important it is.
Mm,
I mean, I have worked with some of the greatest coaches in the world, but the thing is like I just
Yeah.
follow the structure, execute it. But I right now believe that that is wrong. You need to figure out how you can train the easiest with the maximum function. And
Hmm.
that means you want to understand what is going on in the mind, what is going on in the body, and understanding the race demands. Of course, you need to understand what is in somebody's DNA. Now, nothing is really changing, only everything is changed right now for Sarah.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that her DNA is not changed
mm,
after she delivered the bird. Her
mhm.
priorities might change. And that is something what we will pivot with, what we will work with. And I think that is just exciting to work with that opportunity.
I have a feeling that this experience will make your coach athlete relationship better, stronger. There's like lessons that you'll come out of this and be like, aha, but it's to like the nth degree, like the most extreme possible, whatever scenario it might be, you're kind of going through now. And then afterwards in 2027, getting ready for the race, you're like, oh yeah, we just need to do this like we did before, but it's at a different level. But it's kind of like you're going through all these experiences just much more rapidly. I mean, every single
Yeah.
day, every week is just like changing. So like, you're going through these cycles that will help you out hopefully in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy, like, the athlete and especially as a professional athlete, like, I don't think anyone will laugh at the fact that Dennis was one of the first people that we told, that we were pregnant because, like, when you're especially if it's your job. I mean, even if it's not your job, like your your coach is the person that they know when you're sick before, sometimes before you do. And they're the ones that are like holding your hand through the
Yeah.
sniffles of like these like silly little things. But even if I hadn't told for some reason, if I hadn't told Dennis that I was pregnant, like I don't think I would have gotten very far in the training week without him like looking at like what I was doing and like like what is going on with Sarah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
such a unique it's such a unique relationship that you get to have as an athlete. Like, do I need do I like I think a lot of athletes, well, I need a coach for sure because I'm not inherently interested in the data and the training. Like I would just
Hmm.
go and train myself into oblivion and then probably never make it to a single bike race if I were left on my own. But I think having someone that's next to you that like knows your body and like what you're capable of doing and truly believes in what you're capable of doing and then helps you to achieve those things and is willing to adapt with you. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like some athletes, I think the best athletes are the most adaptable ones. And it's really hard to do. I mean, this whole process has made me realize how much I actually really needed control in my life. Like I thought I was more of a type B person, but I have realized that I'm not. I actually really like having things locked in and more control than I get to have now in my
Yeah.
life moving forward. So
Well,
it's nice to have guidance.
can you say, Dennis, that you are in some respects like the counselor? You're the therapist in a way, you know?
I really enjoy talking with Sarah about everything here. No, but like truly, like we figure things out together, and together we have quite a lot of knowledge. But with knowledge by itself, you don't go anywhere neither. Like
Yeah,
if I do not know, if she would not communicate how she's feeling, I mean, you can have the knowledge in the world. Like what I tell Sarah very often, I'm not a doctor. I am not a gynecologist.
hmm
Like the medical team, they, they have first say. Then
Yeah.
you tell me how you're feeling, and we go from there.
hmm
But it's great to be communicating on this basis and help her out like every truly optional training day by day. We figure it
literally
out.
every day. Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
just to like comment on that, I I work with amazing doctors. I mean, I have a great team here, but and even though I'm in Durango where like there's a lot of professional athletes, there's not a lot of information because I
Hmm.
think everyone like my doctors are helpful in the way that like this is what's happening to your body and here's some great books to read and like, oh, if you need to take a painkiller you can't take any but you can do the like that's what they're helpful with. But like you know first thing, one of my goals, and it didn't end up happening because I felt so bad, but I really wanted to make this training ride happen in California. And it was like sort of at the end of my first trimester. And, we even put it into Training Peaks. I was like, I really wanted to do the Bodega Run, which is it used to be the coast ride in California. It's like a 4-day, training ride with a bunch of people. And I would have been there with a bunch of people who didn't know that I was pregnant. And they're like 140-mile days. Like, last year it took us like 9 to 11 hours to do some of these
Wow.
big. I mean, they were massive. And this year was even harder and it's mixed terrain. And I was like, this is going to be perfect. It's a perfect goal. It's not a race. Like there's a sag wagon, like I can hop in. And I remember asking my doctor and I was like, okay, this is this is the scenario. Like, can I go do this? Like, I'm in my first trimester, like she, takes my blood pressure. And I was like, and this is what it is. And she's like, yeah, if you feel good, go do it. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? Like, did you hear what I
How do I
said? Like,
plan for that?
yeah, how do I play? And but they like she just has no like, I'm a pro athlete sitting there in front of her, and she's like, okay, if this girl like thinks, or if this woman feels good, like she can go do this thing. But I think Dennis probably was like, yeah, this is probably not going to happen, but we'll put it on Training Peaks and see if Sarah feels good enough. But I just remember feeling like because she was like, "Oh yeah, go and do this." Like you're free. Like I just was like, "Oh, she has no idea." Like this,
Right.
and to no fault of hers, like she's not a professional coach. Like she's a doctor. I mean, she's like, "Yeah, if you feel okay, you can do it." And that's basically the advice, the medical advice that I've been given. And it's not really to any fault of hers, but it's not like people study pregnant women. Like there's very little data.
Elite
Um
cycling pregnant women.
Yeah, but like, I mean, it's why like I'm working with my nutritionist and we're gathering like sweat test
Mm,
data right now because we have some data from before I was pregnant. And now, like, it's a cool opportunity to be like non invasive testing
yeah.
because there's not a lot of information out there. It's a tricky thing to study pregnant women. There's a lot of
Man,
variables, but it's also really frustrating when you're, an athlete or just a person because your doctor is like, I mean, and I get it. Like, and Dennis is sort of like basically told me similar things, but he's a little more along for the ride with me. But back to RPE. It's like, man, if you feel okay, go and do the thing. Just don't get too hot. Is pretty
Yeah.
much like the thing that
So when did you guys know to take that off Training Peaks? I mean, it was on, and then you
uh
obviously didn't do it. So what led up to that decision?
I don't know if I mean, I can say like when I knew it was time, it was like a few days before I would have gone. But I was like, man, this is not going to happen. I could
All right.
like barely ride without like getting off the bike and, trying not to throw up.
Yeah.
But maybe Dennis knew before me. I just was stubborn because I was like, this is a great goal.
Yeah, we
Dennis?
had it set as a goal. Yeah, no, we had it set as a goal, and like you just have to pivot along the way. Like it's, I mean, if a pregnant athlete tells you, I want to go do this, but it's 3 weeks in time from now, yeah. I mean, I'm for sure not gonna say, yeah, take that out of your mind. He's gonna be pissed off with me instead of with Dylan. Like
Yeah.
maybe I should actually take one for the team next time. I didn't think about that,
Yeah,
but
yeah, Dylan
Yeah.
will appreciate
Yeah.
that.
yeah. No, but like I'm not gonna take that off. I mean, like you can have dreams. You can really try to strive for specific goals, but Sarah is very disciplined. She knows what RPE she should be striving for. She knows how she needs to hydrate. She knows how she needs to fuel. She knows all the red stop signs. And she will stop, yes or yes. I mean, that is the confidence we have in each other, and that is also why I can, you know, build workouts for every week, and we speak about that, and then she can go or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It is
Everything
hard to
is,
stop.
uh,
Yeah, but that's been, and I appreciate Dennis like building that into like not only when we talk, but like on my workouts. It like there's always sort of like this asterisk at the bottom that's like if and when you don't feel good, or like if like especially when like we're going into the hotter summer months now,
Yeah.
and getting too hot is definitely a big concern of mine, and that is something I take really seriously because I've been told that, and that's like the biggest thing. But there was my mindset has shifted now, like we're 5 months in, and yeah, like I was on a training ride with some of the girls here that I usually train with for the season and race against. And I was like, I'm just going to tack on to your ride. You guys do your thing. They were doing intervals. I was just kind of like keeping my pace. And at one point, like, and this is very not how I operate normally. I was looking again at my heart rate. I've never looked at my heart rate so much in my life. But I was like, man, I've been holding 160 for like an hour, like, just watching it like kind of hover around there. And I was feeling really taxed. And instead of just pushing through it, which I normally would do as a normal athlete, I was just like, I don't really need to be putting my body under this
Yeah.
stress. And those moments I'm like, I just can think of what Dennis would say, and I know he would support that decision, but it's a different mindset shift for me for sure, because it's like God, my normal athlete self would then be racked with guilt of like, oh, I didn't achieve this thing, like training ride that I was supposed to do, and oh, I worry about that in this next race that, but now it's like, oh, I really confidently feel like I made the right choice, because like it's just a choice to even be out here riding anyway
Yeah.
right now. It's not like I'm going to be setting power goals or power number records. So, yeah, it's just been a huge shift, but like those little small things that Dennis has sort of ingrained in our coaching, and just like seeing it on my training each day too, especially when I have like workouts that he's prescribed. It's like there's always like a shut off, button too, that he's like, if you don't feel good, don't do this.
Yeah.
Which is like a no duh thing, but then I don't know, as an athlete, like it's nice to like have that reassurance.
it's based off the sensations and the natural governors. Like you're breathing very hard. Like what you said earlier is like, okay, my heart rate does not go over 160 anymore, but what is your ventilation? You're
Oh,
you're
crazy.
breathing exactly. So with that, we are safely training.
And
Yeah.
it's, on that too, I especially in the first trimester and a little bit into the second, I really was focused on, like, other women who were athletes and pregnant that were able to, like, what I felt, do so much more than I was able to do, and I remember really struggling with that earlier in the pregnancy. I was like, "Oh, but these other women are, like, how can they run marathons? And, like, Erin can, like, race the Olympics, and I can barely get out of bed." Like, it's just, and I'm like, I'm a pro athlete. Like, I know how to suffer, and, like, I couldn't do all of this stuff. And, it's you go through so much. And,
Yeah.
Dennis has to just sit there and hear me complain about the same things. And I'm like, I just didn't understand. Like, it,
Yeah.
yeah. And I wanted answers from my doctor too. And she was just like, every pregnancy is different. And
Well,
you
there's
just,
equal
yeah,
amount of pregnant women that do less than you that have
totally.
been pro. I mean, you've talked about it, but Ruth Edwards, right, has had
Yes.
different experience,
Very.
and she's podium world tour, but then can not train at all,
Yeah.
and they're all different. Who have you reached out to, if you don't mind? Maybe.
Actually, Ruth has been really, really helpful. I was actually chatting with her about her experience, like right after she announced she was pregnant. I just had so many questions, and I didn't know it at the time, but I also was pregnant when I was
Oh yeah,
chatting with her, and
crazy.
then I sort of had to, like, ghost her because I was like, "Oh my god, I found out that I was
Wow.
pregnant, and I
Yeah.
wasn't ready to tell people." But
Wow.
she's been like a really important figure for me, just because Ruth and I have raced together in the Grand Prix. I've watched her, you know, podium a stage of the women's tour
Yeah.
last year. And now chatting with her through her very challenging pregnancy. I mean, she's had, anytime I was, like, feeling really, really down, I feel like Ruth was having a harder day, honestly.
Hmm.
And she's, one of the best female athletes in the country, if not world. So, I mean, I'm bummed that she doesn't feel good. Like, that just sucks to, like, just be
Hmm.
sick for, 6 months now. She's
Yeah.
a few months ahead of me. So I can kind of see my future too as she progresses in her pregnancy. But it's really, I've really, really appreciated her perspective and what she's chosen to, she doesn't have to share anything. None of us do, but it is really helpful. And she actually had a post like a month ago, and she was like, she talked about how a lot of her friends, especially when they're pregnant, get off of social media because it can kind of be this cesspool of, what you should be doing and positivity and, like, what all these women are able to do. And then if
Yeah.
you're sitting there, having a really challenging pregnancy, it's, the most demoralizing thing to see. And I appreciated that she chose to share that she was pretty down and, like,
Yeah.
pretty much in bed eating, peanut butter when she could keep it down.
Yeah.
And, we see her as, like, this incredible, and she is an incredible athlete, and that won't change. But I'm pretty sure she has goals to go to the women's tour after, she gives birth. So and I don't doubt for a second that she will achieve that. But then I'm also friends with, who had her baby last year around a very similar timeline to me. And she had a very easy pregnancy and was able to, like, race the 50-mile at Unbound.
Yeah.
And racing was something that Dennis and I felt very, very supported in our decision to not do any races, which was really, really helpful to have my coach kind of encourage that, honestly, because I'm so competitive that, like, I would want to make that happen if he hadn't, helped me understand, like, what are your goals? Like, is there a reason for you to want to race? Like, I think those sorts of things, Dennis, for me personally, just because I'm just such a competitive person and I love bike racing. For me, it didn't really actually make sense to compete in races, um, pregnant.
Yeah. But you do have plans this year to attend
Yeah,
some
I'll be
events,
at the
possibly?
events. Yeah, like, Dennis and I'll get to see each other at Sea Otter and then at Traca, and then I'll be at Unbound, and then I'll be home.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I will see you. Dennis, will you be at Unbound?
Maybe,
All right.
likely.
Well, I'll be there doing the 100 again. So it's such a
Oh,
great event.
cool.
Yeah, looking forward to that. How are you planning the postpartum, I guess, expectations, Dennis? Like, is it again just day by day, or what are you thinking in terms of like, well, she's going to be on the start line next Sea Otter,
Hmm.
hopefully, right? You're
Yeah,
working
a year
backwards
from
from there a
now.
bit. A
I
year
mean,
from now?
I'm almost like a broken record. I mean, it's something completely different than somebody who comes back from an injury. But like what we spoke about earlier, it's not like an injury. It's something way greater, way bigger, way better than that. But um, I just always take it day by day with my riders,
Yeah,
day by day. We have to just figure it out.
it's a really healthy mindset to have, and something that I've become very adapted to now with our training.
Yeah. Well,
It's
like I
like it's
It's
said,
not always
meditative.
easy.
No.
no.
It's not no, but it's not always easy to also go day by day. I mean, Sarah is somebody extremely competitive. She just wants to know that she is gonna be flying next year in Sea Otter.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, she would also not trust me if I say, you know what, you will be flying next year. Yes, she would not trust me either.
Yeah.
So that is the relationship
Yeah.
what we grow into, and what we will continue.
Yeah.
Well, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of the personal coach. If you put the plan out there now, it's not going to play out that way,
Hmm.
and it
No,
might completely derail you if you put the plan out there. And there's going to be days where you can't train at all, and other days where 20 minutes is like a huge success. On the spin bike.
Yeah. Oh my God, the spin bike.
yeah,
Yikes. That brings me back.
yeah, yeah.
I know. I feel like I'm gonna have to get really accustomed to loving my indoor trainer.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, thanks so much. Again, thanks so much for being so open and public. Any last advice for, women thinking about having family, preparing, any kind of advice you wish
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like let's see. Well, my best advice if you're wanting to, start a family and you're a professional athlete or just someone who's athletic and, has goals, that it can be done. But also I think the most important thing for me has been establishing a really solid community around yourself.
Oh,
So
yeah.
from coach to parents to friends to, training partners. I truly would not be healthy and happy right now if I didn't have those people in place supporting me. Really, I mean, it is the difference between, I believe, a healthy pregnancy and a really, really challenging one. It's like bike racing, like you can't the person who wins the race, they're not doing that alone. It's a team of people. And I'm sort of approaching this whole thing, with the athlete mindset of that's something I've always known to be true. As an athlete, you're not in it alone at all. And I really love working with a coach and having someone there with me, and it's beyond just coaching. It's like you need to
Yeah.
have, a really great support system in place, and you have to lean on those people. I would have told more people a little earlier, because the first 3 months were really, really isolating and really lonely. So that's my advice to someone who wants to go through this or is going through it.
Yeah, well, this story has not been told enough. So
Yeah.
thank you guys for opening up, and it's going to educate a whole lot more folks out there, and me included. So it's going to be great following along, and really, really, congratulations. And
Thanks.
yeah, and then make the most of each day right now, I guess. And
Yeah, as Dennis would say.
yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see you at Unbound.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Dennis. Sarah.
thank you.
Thanks for listening to Endurance Unlimited. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on your platform of choice to never miss new episodes. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star rating to let your coach and the algorithm know you're ready to dial in your training. Find more resources to help you take on your next challenge at trainingpeaks.com or find us on social media at TrainingPeaks. Got questions? Leave a comment or send an email to podcast@trainingpeaks.com. Good luck in whatever you're training for and trust the process to reach your potential.